Welcome to Becoming Parents podcast. I'm Jen Taylor, your host. I am mom of 18, and you can find me on momsrunningit.com. Remember, give a shout out to those who are brave enough to share their stories with us on how they have become parents. Let's dive right in. Hello and welcome to Becoming Parents. I have Leslie here, author of You Can't Eat Love, which as soon as I read the title, I knew exactly what the book was about. Welcome. How are you today?
I am great. But, I have to say, I have been stalking you for quite some time because the first time I ran across you, I can't remember the exact event or circumstance or whatever. I was absolutely fascinated with your story. Mom of 18, holy Toledo. But in addition to just that, you are such an amazing, inspirational person that I don't know what the term is these days, but I am geeking out that I actually get to talk to you.
It's so funny because, I've been around for a long time and you just don't know. You don't know that people are watching or that you're making a difference. And so that I read that on your information that you sent to me, that like, how do we know each other? Where do we connect? Because that means a lot to me. And you're like, I've watched you. And that's the first time somebody has signed up to be a guest because you're the first one that has signed up because you watched me. So that's really fun.
Well, and like I said, I was so excited to be able to actually talk to you because I feel as if, I know you, we're best friends and everything, but
we are. I just haven't gotten to know you yet. And so that's what today is for. So that's really good.
Yes. It's been a one-sided, relationship, but that's okay. That's okay.
That it is okay. That happens so much, I think, with lots of people where like I follow people and I feel like I know them and I don't. And so it can be a little awkward when I finally say hello, because for me, it's not the first time. I'm gonna jump into your story, and we have you have a book, you've been on podcast, you have a website. All of your links are in the description. So in every description, wherever this is, people can find you and connect with you. And I like to give that as a reminder. But I want to jump into your parenting journey and the bullet point, which I have a few bullet points and I love yours. And the one that stands out to me the most, though, and it's why I titled this the way I did, is that you lost your mother 2 weeks before you gave birth to your child. I don't know if it was your first child.
Yeah, it was my first one, my oldest one, her first grandchild too.
Let's jump into that because obviously you're pregnant, very, very, very pregnant. And so kind of catch me up to speed a little bit with the relationship with your mom and that pregnancy and then losing her at that point.
Well, I'm the oldest of 6 kids. And as you know, it can be difficult for a parent to have a relationship with children. And of course, we go through the teenage years. And then when I graduated from high school and went off to college, my parents moved to Alaska. So that really was the last time that I lived with my family. Yes, I did go visit them at Christmas and summertime, but they were living basically on what might have been another continent at that point in time. So while we had a relationship, it was more like an acquaintance relationship. And here I found out that I was I got married. My mother got sick, found out she was very, very ill with cancer shortly after I got married. So for the next 2 years, she essentially was, fighting the cancer. Well, then we found out we were going to have the baby, and literally 2 to 3 days later, the cancer severed her spinal cord and she was paralyzed from the armpits down. Wow. So I was never pregnant, if you can understand that, because during the entire time that I was expecting, my mother was dying. So you can just imagine where my focus was, what my fears were and all this. And a lot of regret started coming out of that because I believed that once I had the baby, that we would be able to develop a relationship very similar to what my mother had with my grandmother and what I even had with my grandmother. So, there's a lot of expectation. And I lived, and he ended up being born early. I mean, imagine that. I wasn't under any stress or anything like that. But just imagine I'm watching all of these dreams, these hopes, these expectations just evaporating in the horror that cancer is. And then she died. She was struggling to live to see him be born, and she just couldn't do it. And so she died, and then 2 weeks later he was born. And then you're thrown in, and I realize I'm not the first person that this has happened to. But you know what? When you're in the midst of something, it doesn't really make any difference if you're the first, the millionth, the 10 millionth. It's happening to you. And your experience is not like anybody else's experience, because we are not the same people. But I never had an opportunity to really grieve that death, just as I really didn't have an opportunity to fully immerse myself in the celebration of the birth. And it took me over 30 years to finally grieve her death.
Yeah, I mean, I really can't imagine that it's happening almost at exactly the same time, and you wouldn't be able to I mean, separating all that would be pretty impossible. So I completely understand why it took so much for you to, and so long for you to grieve the death. And also, that's one part of it, right? Grieving your mom's death is one part that took you a long time, and I understand that. Having the baby, though, you can put the grief on hold. It's never going to go away. You can address it whenever you want, but the baby is very live and in person. What was that like? Like, you had to recover from the delivery. You had to bond with this baby. So how much do you feel like that changed your ability to do that the way you would have in different circumstances?
Well, I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I'll be
Okay.
very, very
Yeah.
honest. I had no clue what I was doing. I had no clue what I was supposed to feel. I had no clue what, activities. I mean, I had zero clue. And while my mother-in-law ended up being there because she arrived in town for a baby shower that didn't happen because baby ended up being born, she wasn't helpful either. And she was not a warm, caring, fuzzy person. So, everybody in my husband and his family, they were all focused on the baby, and my family was so destroyed. They were focused on their grief. And I was left sitting there going, what is it I'm supposed to be doing? I had zero problem. And I look back, and I probably did slide into some postpartum depression that was compounded by the depression that I was already experiencing. But I look back, and I laugh with a lot of kindness, because less than a week after the baby was born, I'm taking a shower, I'm putting on full makeup, I'm putting on, dresses, I'm putting on pantyhose, I'm cramming my feet into shoes because the water weight had I had over 30 pounds of water weight on me, and my feet had spread. And I was determined that I was not going to give up my Ferragamo shoes. So I was cramming my feet into my Ferragamo shoes, to get them to squish back. And I was putting on pearls, and I'm doing all this. And I was living the only way that I thought that I should be living, which was like, Leave It to Beaver's mother, or Donna Reed from the Donna Reed Show. Yes, you guys can Google or YouTube Donna Reed and Leave It to Beaver. But that was the only role model that I could come up with. And I didn't have anybody to ask, what is it I'm really supposed to be doing? What am I really supposed to be feeling? And I focused on keeping the house clean, making sure that meals were prepared and all this stuff. And, like I said, I made it up. And I tell people all the time, I made it up as I went along because I had nobody to ask.
I want to comment on something that you just said. You said that you possibly were having postpartum depression on top of the depression you were already experiencing. So I want to expand on that just a little. I don't think it's something that we talk about nearly enough. And the other thing that I want to expand upon is that you mentioned in your it's in the show notes that babies don't come with an owner's manual, and neither do children. And I don't think there should be an owner's manual because every child is so different and every parent is so different. And then you add the dad and the mom, and like that's different. And so there's no way you could say, oh, this is what you do, this is how to do it. That doesn't exist because every situation's different. So I want to talk a little bit about like the manuals and just doing it. Also, what year was your son born? Because people don't realize how much the generation matters. So when was he born?
1984.
Okay, see, so I graduated high school in 1988. So I have a reference to that. 1984, where women were not banding together, and we still don't, but definitely not then. And uh there wasn't as much information, and you were still, I like Leave It to Beaver. I know what all of that is. I watched it. So um yeah, there was no information. There was no internet. There were no like group Zoom calls. There was nothing. We didn't have the same support then that we do now. And so you were definitely lost. So let's first talk about the depression, and second talk about like you were just doing what you thought you were supposed to do, and babies don't come with an owner's manual. I don't know if people realize this, but we're all winging it.
which is the truth. Yeah, and that was what I finally later, figured out. And I tell my kids, I said, I'm really, really sorry, but I made it up as I went along. But one of the reasons that I say, babies don't come with owner's manuals is I'm one of those people who expect to follow the rules, expect to follow the guidelines, expect to do all these things. And here I'm thrown into a situation where you might as well have tossed me into the middle of a ginormous ocean for all the help and support that I had. Now, understand, I am not saying that, I should have had more help and I should have had more support. And I hate that word should. I'm on a campaign to remove it from the dictionary. But the truth of the matter is I was thrown into this giant ocean, and I'm a rule follower. Give me some guidelines, a framework to work in. And I had absolutely nothing. In addition, as you said, back in 1984, the phones weren't even cordless at that point in time. They were still attached to the walls. Answering machines hadn't even been really, invented and were, quite novel. But I didn't know, people didn't know where to go for help. So you turn to these books that are written by, pardon me, men. Right. That are based on some studies, Dr. Spock and that kind of Yep. thing. And I didn't like the information that was there. It didn't make sense to me. When I would try and have a conversation with the doctor, I felt as if I wasn't being heard. I just, I really struggled. And I'm not saying that today people don't struggle. What I am saying is, please, you're not struggling alone. Reach out. Don't do what I did, because I didn't know how to reach out for help. I had no idea how to do it. And truthfully, it was available. It's simply that at that point in time, access to information was not as available as it is today.
Yeah. That is true. And the Dr. Spock book was the #1 book, and it's terrible. And yeah, we didn't have information. I think women struggle just as much today as they did before. And part of their struggle now might be that they're overloaded with information instead of when we started our journey. My first daughter was born in 92. When we first started we had a lack of information or a lot of misinformation, and you were looking for that generational support that often didn't exist for us. And so, that made it hard for us, the lack of support and information. Now it's like they're overloaded with information. So like my daughter that has little ones, she's like, I'm never going to do it right, because no matter what path you choose, there's all these people telling you how wrong it is. So, but it's a real thing, and women still don't depend on each other. We still don't support each other like we should. And we still don't talk enough about the depression that a lot of women feel after they have a baby. On top of depression, maybe they're feeling outside of having a baby. And so, it's really sad to me that that stuff isn't being shared more, and we're not more of a support. So you didn't have family support and you're dealing with grief. How many kids did you have and how close together were they?
Well, I have the two older boys, and they are 2 years and a little couple of months apart. And then I got divorced and then remarried, and I have a third son in 95. But again, I was alone. I didn't have the support because by that point in time, I had taught myself that I had to do it alone, that I could not, that it was inappropriate, it was weak, to ask for outside help. And one of the things that I talk about in my book, You Can't Eat Love, is that taking care of yourself is not selfish. And it took me so many years to recognize that. And I repeatedly talk to people, and in the book, put your own oxygen mask on first.
Right.
And one of the things that I've come to recognize, and trust me, I was part of the women's lib movement. I was, supporting them. Let's go. I believed that everything was going to become whatever they anticipated it becoming, and it didn't happen because we have not figured out a way to come together and support each other. Right. So I say to people, society is trying to impose certain things on us. And it is up to us as individuals to ignore what society is saying and to say, something, it's okay for us to feel sad. It is okay for us to feel frustrated. It is okay for us to feel overwhelmed. Nobody is going to get this parenting thing right. And it is not intended to be gotten right. The best thing that we can do is love ourselves enough so that we have love to give to these children that are put into our care, so that we can teach them how to love themselves, so that they in turn can learn to love the rest of the world. Because it's only when we are, and I'm not going to use the word selfish, when we are introspective enough to recognize that taking care of ourselves is not selfish, that we must be filling up our gas tank. Only then are we going to see real change when it comes to parenting.
Absolutely. And I talk about this a lot also. I think we have this idea that like self-care is so overused, now that it seems like a bad thing. And we put all this pressure on ourselves that we need to go spend $300 on a 90-minute massage. And it's not that. I mean, it is that, it can be that, but that's not what's going to get you through. Hiding chocolate in your bathroom is what, like, self-care is not just these big things. It's not the pedicure, right? It's how we treat ourselves. I think everything in life is compound interest. And all compound interest is small, easy, daily actions that add up over time. And that's the chocolate that's hidden in the drawer in your bathroom or your bedroom, or it's the fact that sometimes you're in your closet with the door shut crying. That's what it looks like. And I think women have this idea that one, they're selfish, and two, it's got to be some big monumental thing that costs a lot of money that we can post on social media. And it's so opposite that. It's those little tiny things we do all the time that reminds us that we're a priority. And so, yeah.
Well, and one of the things that I talk about repeatedly is, celebrate the small wins. Celebrate the small wins, because one of the things that I discovered, one of the things that I learned was, for example, you're having a bad day. I mean, who doesn't have a bad day? Mm-hmm. You get small children running around, you can have a bad day. And I would catch myself saying nothing but no. And when I would come to the realization that the only words coming out of my mouth were no, I said, okay, we need to figure out a way to reframe how we are making these statements. And so I would start reframing instead of saying no and being in a negative fashion. Well, fast forward to this many years, what I've learned and what I've refined is we can reframe discipline, we can reframe correction, we can do all these things positively. If we will acknowledge and accept and reward the things that we want to have continue, then we will see them continue. If we ignore, totally, absolutely ignore the things we want to stop, they will stop. Because think about the kid in class, the one that keeps acting up. Why do they keep acting up? Because they're getting rewarded. You may say, well, they're getting hollered at all the time. They're ending up in timeout or whatever. Yes, it's a reward. Your brain does not know the difference between a good reward and a bad reward. It simply knows that it is being rewarded. So one of the things that I try to encourage people with is look for the good things. For example, if you've got children and they're dropping their towels all over the place, if you notice that one day they happen to pick the towel up and put it where you want it to go, it may not be folded properly, it may not be hung properly. Who the flip cares, really and truly, in the big picture? But you notice that they hung it up. Comment, so-and-so, I noticed that you hung your towel up. I want to let you know I really appreciate it. Does that sound crazy? Does that sound, whatever? Yes, but you know what? When you start noticing the things that they are doing that you want them to do, it doesn't make any difference how correct or perfect it is. They will start doing more. And will quit looking at you sideways when you make the comment.
I realized also something you have to realize is like, if I'm sweeping the floor compared to a child sweeping the floor, they're never going to do it at my level. They're never going to do it. So actually what they're doing at their level is perfect for that situation. So folding the towel or anything that gets done, you're talking about, I mean, some of your suggestions, which are great, is to learn to laugh and to use positive reinforcement. It's not about how well it was done. It was about recognizing that there was an effort that was made. And you're right, that makes them want to do it more. And then they will do it better over time just because they're doing it more often. Because kids aren't good at this stuff. Some husbands aren't that great at this stuff. I mean,
well, you can retrain your husband if you use the positive reinforcement. Trust me, you can. Yeah. But when we are constantly picking at the negative stuff, everybody gets exhausted. Everybody gets so tired. And one of the things that I figured out, because I'm a lazy parent. Okay, remember, I didn't have anybody to help me with this, but I made up all kinds of rules. I'm a lazy parent. I will admit it. I tried the timeout thing. It didn't work. For me, it did not work. I was exhausted trying to remember who was in timeout for what time and how long and what the next step was and all that kind of stuff. So what I ended up doing, because, at the end of the day, you need to do what you need to do in order to have peace of mind and not feel as if your face is constantly squinched into this scowl and your kids aren't running from you when they see you. So what I ended up doing is I put stuff in timeout. If they're fighting over a toy, I would say, you know what? Sounds to me like the toy is having a hard time following the rules right now. So the toy is going to go in timeout until it understands how to follow the rules and it can play without, getting into an argument. Kids will accept that. They understand, something wasn't following the rules. Chaos erupted. It needs to go, sit and settle down for a while. They get back to what they're doing without any great big giant hoorah. I'm not setting timers on the microwave. I'm not, chasing people down because they won't stay in place. I'm getting back to what it is I'm doing. And as time moves forward, my kids came to understand that they were never going to be put in timeout, but stuff dadgum sure was. The Nintendo was going in timeout. And I had a friend who was struggling with her daughter over a cell phone. And she was so frustrated with the timeouts and the groundeds and all this stuff. I said, stop, put the phone in timeout. Tell her the phone doesn't know how to behave. So the phone is going to go into timeout until it figures out how to behave. You're addressing the behavior. You're addressing the problem. You're not calling the kid bad. You're not doing anything like that, but you're giving, everybody is getting a break from whatever it was that was causing an issue. And then people have time to sort it out. So like I said, some people timeout work didn't work for me. I put stuff in timeout. It made my life easier, so much easier.
I thought that was so great when I read that. I love that idea. It takes all of the pressure off of the kid,
Right.
and it takes all the pressure off the parent too.
Yep.
I want to wrap up because I feel like we haven't talked about this a lot. Like I said, your website, Facebook, and Instagram is all, the links are all in the description, and people can find you. So I do want you to mention the easiest way to get in touch with you. But you wrote a book, and your journey into losing weight and becoming healthy, how connected was that to your parenting? So I want you to touch a little bit on that story to kind of wrap up and let people know how the best way to find you.
Well, my journey was actually applying all the things that I had done, with raising my children, speaking to myself, learning to speak to myself kindly, observing how I was feeling and honoring those feelings. It really was everything that I had done with raising my children. I simply didn't apply it to myself during that time. I didn't believe that I was worthy of being loved. I thought that I was missing love, and the only love I was missing was love for myself. So truthfully, all these little, because I even put food in timeout. Some food doesn't know how to behave, so it's not allowed into my house. Same thing as with toys and that kind of stuff. Of course you feel whatever. I mean, those are the words that I would use in speaking to my children. So truthfully, the journey is about how I took all those things that I made up and applied to my children. And I simply started applying them to myself and went on that journey to learn to love myself. But the other thing that it allowed me to do was it allowed me to finally grieve the loss of my mother. And that helped me to release a whole lot of things. And I would like to say to parents who are listening, if we can teach small children how to grieve loss, whether it's a broken toy, a stub toe, whatever it is, if we can teach small children in the safety and confines of our home, surrounded by people who love and care and cherish them, then when they are faced with tremendous loss, they will have the tools, the skills, and the ability to cope with it so that it doesn't take them over 30 years to grieve it. Because here's the problem. When we do not address emotions, especially grief, they come out sideways. And the best way to reach me is through my website, which is youcan'teatlove.com. And there's links to Facebook, Instagram, everything there, including ways to just reach out to me if you want to send a message. And I would love to hear from you.
Oh, thank you, Leslie. Thank you so much for being on. And I love all the connections to your grief and your parenting and your weight loss. And get the book, guys. Get some help. Reach out to Leslie. Thank you so much for being on.
Oh, well, thank you so much, and keep doing what you're doing.